12-Tone News proudly presents Colorado Inside Out, bringing you the city, the state, the nation, and the world. Good evening, Colorado, from high atop the beautiful 5 Points Media Center. It's time for Colorado Inside Out, the show that keeps KBDI's ever-watchful beady eye on the issues of our times. Brought to you by Packard Motor Cars, now celebrating 40 years of the quality engineering and craftsmanship required to live up to our slogan, Ask the Man Who Owns One. And now, Colorado Inside Out is on the air.
Good evening, and welcome to the October 5th, 1940 edition of Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host, Gene O'Fallon. You may recognize me as the manager of KFEL-AM. That's 950 on your dial here in Denver. Before we begin the show, let's meet tonight's panel as we look at the issues impacting our city, our country, and our world. First, to my immediate left, Emily Griffith, renowned and now retired teacher and school administrator. Thanks for joining us.
I am so honored to be here. You know, I have retired. I now live up in Estes Park in a little cabin, but I pay very close attention to what is going on in Denver. You know, the school now bears my name, and they're doing wonderful work, and so I'm very honored to be here with you.
Also with us tonight is State Attorney General Byron G. Rogers. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And I want to say that as Attorney General, even though we represent state government agencies in court, we always view our real job, our real client, as being the people of Colorado. So in a sense, I'm the lawyer for all the listeners in Radioland, and I'm also the Democratic nominee for the United States House of Representatives in the 3rd Congressional District in southwestern Colorado.
Also joining us, the city editor of the Rocky Mountain News, Robert Chase.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm just fresh off our state deadline and hope that we get this show done. I got to get back for the city deadline and get that paper out on the streets.
Well, we certainly don't want you to miss that deadline. Rounding out our panel, another newspaper reporter, Sinclair Carney from the Denver Star. Thank you, Ms. Carney.
Thank you, and thank you for asking me. I really had to hurry to do this. I left Washington, D.C., where I was meeting with the annual meeting of the National Negro Press Association, and I was very excited to be part of this roundtable, so thank you.
We're very excited to have you all here. Let's take a look at a 12-tone newsreel for a special report on some of the events happening around the world.
Dateline, the spring of 1940. As America stood idly by, the Nazi blitzkrieg swept across Belgium and France. The battered British Expeditionary Force lived to fight another day after their miraculous evacuation at Dunkirk. But at this moment, Great Britain's Royal Air Force is in a life and death struggle with the German Luftwaffe to determine the fate of democracy in Europe.
Opinion polls show the American people still oppose getting involved in another European war. But here in Colorado, preparation for war is taking place. The new munitions plant being built west of town is almost finished, as is the Lowry Airfield. The Army is still looking for funds to complete the new Fitzsimmons Hospital east of town. And a number of Colorado companies are also receiving contracts for military goods like packs and harnesses. Ms. Griffith, let's get to you first. What do you think about the preparation here in Colorado for what might be us going to war sometime in the future?
Well, it certainly looks like, from the expenditures, as though this country is gearing up for war. I think it's good for Colorado that we are involved, that we are getting our fair part. I'm sure the hospital at Fitzsimmons will work out well and be finished on time. Who could imagine any other type of situation there? But we have to be cautious. I opened my school here, the Opportunity School, 2 years before our boys went to war in 1918, and the horrible, horrible things they suffered overseas. We cannot let that happen again and not take care of our veterans when they return. But my school educates so many of those who are from other countries. They spoke different languages. They came here because they had bad situations in their own homes. We're seeing those refugees again today. We have got to help them. We have to do as much as we possibly can to help their war efforts. Whether that means we get in the war or not, I will leave that to Washington.
Attorney General Rogers, as you look at the situation, what do you think President Roosevelt should do when it comes to what's happening in Europe?
He's doing exactly the right thing to give us the best chance of not having to fight, to not have the war come to us, and that means helping England with every form of aid short of war. I strongly supported his agreement he made with the British to sell them 50 old destroyers left over from the Great War in exchange for 8 naval bases, Newfoundland, Bermuda, and the Caribbean, of theirs that are now ours, so we can better defend our own Western Hemisphere. We now have the first peacetime military conscription, universal military training in the history of the country, the Burke-Wadsworth Bill. I strongly supported that. We have to build up our forces as strong as they can possibly be. That's the best way to deter the tripartite pact, Rome, Berlin, Tokyo, from attacking us. We can't be scaredy cats about this. The gods of war and hate are running wild in Europe and Asia. We need to do everything we can to help the Free French and the British stop them before they come to us.
Mr. Chase, you have reporters throughout the city. What's the word on the street about the opinions of real Coloradans of the issues of our world?
Well, in Colorado, I think people are very skeptical of going to war, but they're not skeptical about being prepared. It makes sense to be prepared for war. It was Hitler's field marshal, Hermann Göring, who said that within a short time they expect to blitzkrieg England, and they'll be through France. And so it looks like this war is only getting worse. It's right for us to be prepared. Now, I think that Senator Alva Adams actually has some very good ideas on war preparedness. In the Great War, there were a lot of naval engagements, of course, but I think in this new war, air battles are going to be one of the prime topics. And I think that in Colorado, of course, we don't have much of a Navy presence here in Colorado, but we do have excellent conditions for aviation. And I think that Senator Adams is right on to push the War Department to engage more in preparation for an air war than for a naval war.
Well, as a veteran of the 72nd Balloon Company in World War I can tell you that air power can certainly be a decisive part of any sort of warfare. Ms. Carney, what do you think as normal Coloradans are approaching this idea of war around the world?
Well, this is perfect timing. As I mentioned, I had just returned from the National Negro Press Association meeting in Washington, D.C., and rumor has it, and it's not even rumor, taking up on what Attorney General Rogers mentioned, that Lend-Lease bill is going to be signed. That Lend-Lease bill is going to be signed, and the United States is going to be in the position to legally, above board, send food and send weapons to Britain, to the French resistance, and to China. And picking up on Robert Chase's air war, this is, I think I'm breaking news right here. The President Roosevelt, is emphatically considering authorizing the training of Negro pilots somewhere in the South. Word is it might be in Alabama, might be Tuskegee, Alabama, but authorizing the training of Negro pilots to serve in the Army Air Corps. I would be looking around the corner, look early in 1941 for that. So definitely the United States is gearing up for war.
That would be historic indeed. Let's get to our next topic. Despite the ongoing depression, Mayor Ben Stapleton of Denver has been on a building binge. A new police station at 13th and Champa just opened up, and a number of new fire stations have been coming online over the past several years. In June, the city staged its own blitzkrieg on a neighborhood along West Colfax Avenue in order to make way for the new Lincoln Park housing project. These projects are underway while the city struggles to take care of a large population of homeless, poor folks, and pensioners. This year, the city was forced to lay off nearly 200 workers to meet the growing funding gap. Attorney General Rogers, is Mayor Stapleton doing the wrong thing here?
I think he's exactly on target. The new Lincoln Park housing project is going to provide 346 apartments. Think about some of the people who could be in that. The people who are living in Squattertown right now at 38th and Platte. The hobos and others who've been there for years, and they've built their own shacks, and some of them are rather proud of what they've made, but we can get them into, people like that, into decent housing. Of course we needed a new police building. That's the government's job to protect us. And Mayor Stapleton has lots of other strong projects going forward. At the airport, he's working with United and Continental Airlines to build new hangars for their planes. And actually, it's a program where the city's going to help, but the airlines will be paying for those new hangars. Denver is with the Air Force Base being built, we're so far. Mr. Chase talked about the air war as perhaps the most important part of what's going on in international force. Denver is so far from anywhere that Jap or Nazi bombers could reach. It's a very good strategic reserve base for all of our air, whether it be civilian or military.
Mr. Chase, do you think Denver should be building all of these fire stations, a police station, all these buildings, when we have all these different poor folks that we need to be helping?
Well, I think it's part and parcel of the same thing. When we are in a depression, when we're in poor economic times, that is exactly the time that we need to be building these infrastructure items. We need to be building streets, roads, schools, fire stations, what have you, because that puts the people to work and enables them to be able to afford a home. Now, I do have a little bit of misgiving, and my reporters have interviewed some of the folks who've been tossed out of the Lincoln Park neighborhood to build these new, as the city densifies. And I think densification is going to be a big issue in this city going forward. 300 and some odd units, but they're replacing some historic homes and families. I want to make sure that they're taken care of in this new scheme. Now, one thing that old Ben is going to have a problem doing is paying for a lot of this, because we are still in tough times. I think Mayor Stapleton has not yet met a tax he didn't like. Why, he's even talking about a driveway tax, a tax on your curb cuts and your street access from your own private property. Might be going a little too far.
Ms. Carney, what do you think? Is there enough being done to help the poor people here in Denver amidst this building binge?
No, absolutely not. Not just in Denver, but in our state. And it's not actually just in Colorado. Across the country, you have state after state after state. They're in a relief crisis. They're in a relief crisis. And so, although I understand looking to the future, building for the future, this is a problem right here, especially when you're building a runway for an airplane vehicle that the average Coloradan certainly could not afford to buy a ticket on. So I have a problem with that, and I have to mention this when we talk about the Lincoln Housing project. The Denver Housing Authority is continuing in its bigoted fashion. That Lincoln Housing project is going to be segregated. It is going to be whites only. So as the United States is gearing to fight a war against the Hitler war machine and the machine of hate, and to be building facilities for the lucky poor who will get to live there, but Negroes and Spanish Americans won't be able to. Makes you think.
Ms. Griffiths, we'll turn it to you. What do you think of both what Ms. Carney said and what Denver is doing in the midst of all of this different economic problems?
Well, Denver cannot do enough to help the poor, but they don't want a handout. They want to be given the tools. You are so right about segregation. When the Opportunity School opened in 1916, we were the first school in the country for free education for adults over 18, and we were integrated. No other school in Denver was integrated, but Opportunity School was integrated. There was no trouble. And what we've done at that school is given the people tools. We've taught them the language, we've taught them welding, we've taught them the tools to get out of poverty and get jobs. So they need tools, they need housing. How can we have taxes? Why not have taxes on driveways and curb cuts? Those people have houses, they have driveways. We need to house the people in Denver who have suffered so badly over the last half dozen years, 10 years of the Depression. So the more we do, the better. The police building, 1245 Champa, it's just around the corner from where the Opportunity School moved in the 20s, and they don't want that property between it for anything else. I mean, we're not building a convention center there or anything like that.
Sounds like a good place for it. During the spring municipal elections this year, citizens of Milliken, Fruita, and Green Mountain Falls voted their towns dry, opting to continue alcohol prohibition. Meanwhile, here in Denver, officials are trying to decide what to do with the tax revenue being generated by the sale of alcohol. The city has also imposed a new tax on cigarettes and wants to impose fees on vending machines and even on penny weight machines. Mr. Chase, you were just talking about all the different taxes in Denver. What do you think about the revenue coming in from this new alcohol tax. Do you think anyone could have predicted this windfall of money from a tax on alcohol?
Well, it gives me a concern that the Rocky Mountain News, we might have to renegotiate with the newspaper guild for a wage increase, because I think my reporting staff is contributing heavily to the revenue stream. But as far as Milliken and Fruita, the more they go dry, I just say that's the more revenue for Denver. Come on into Denver. Now, sin taxes, they're voluntary. You have to, you volunteer to do this. But I think we could probably get a lot more revenue if we looked at some of the other sins that are readily available on the streets of Denver. How about prostitution? How about a tax on gambling? How about a tax on narcotics, the narcotics trade? How much money would that bring in? Think of all the revenue streams that could be going into the public improvements and jobs, providing for jobs for the out-of-work folks in the city of Denver. The Attorney General talked about the unfortunate folks living for years and years down in the river bottoms in their makeshift shacks. And here's Ben Stapleton trying to kick them out. Why, they could have useful jobs with these revenue streams.
Ms. Carney, do you think more cities will follow the lead of cities like Milliken and decide to keep out alcohol? Or do you think they'll follow the lead of Denver and try to tax and enjoy the new revenues from this new tax?
I have to say, here to Denver. That's the city, that's thinking of the future. People are going to imbibe. They're going to imbibe. The city might as well profit from it. And as for these rural types, and I have to be candid here, we're talking about Milliken and Fruita. These rural types, they cling to their rifles, they cling to their Bibles, they cling to their teacups, but somehow they always manage to find the booze. They always manage to find the booze when the lights go down.
Ms. Griffiths, bold words from Ms. Carney. What do you think? Will more cities follow the way of banning alcohol, or do you think they'll enjoy the tax revenue that Denver's now seeing?
Well, the failed prohibition experiment shows us that there is no reason for this country to have a blanket prohibition on alcohol. Many cultures enjoy alcohol. They enjoy alcohol in a responsible way. They're not lying in the gutters like sounds like Mr. Chase's newspaper people are. And so I think let's tax it, let's make some money, and let's put the money to helping the people in Denver who so badly need that help.
And Attorney General Rogers, I'm very interested to hear your viewpoint on this issue.
Well, I was born in a small town in Texas, grew up in Oklahoma, and moved to Colorado, and I'm from Los Animas. So I certainly don't agree with people who look down on rural Colorado and the people in the 3rd Congressional District, in Milliken or Fruita or anywhere else. They have the right to choose whether their town will be wet or dry. And that's, in my mind, why we repealed prohibition, to replace a national one-size-fits-all with something that fits well for every town and every town can choose. Now, that said, I think our alcohol taxes are going to the right thing. 85% of the ad valorem property taxes on alcohol property goes to support our state old age pension. We were ahead of the national social security when the voters of Colorado created by a constitutional amendment an old age pension for the people in Colorado. That's progressive, and it's the right thing to do, to fund it as much as possible as we can with voluntary taxes, in a sense, from things like alcohol rather than taxes on the working man.
We are exactly 1 month away from the 1940 presidential election. President Roosevelt is seeking an unprecedented 3rd term. Roosevelt's plan includes a tax increase for defense readiness. His Republican opponent, Wendell Willkie, a former Democrat, is critical of Roosevelt's work to bring an end to the Depression. Ms. Carney, what do you think of Mr. Roosevelt's chances of getting an unprecedented 3rd term as president?
I think President Roosevelt stands a fabulous chance of winning a 3rd term. He will. I predict right here he will, but it won't be with Colorado. Colorado seems to be getting back to its Republican roots. In 1932 and in 1936, our great state went for Roosevelt, but not this time. And I think part of it has to do with Wendell Willkie and his isolationism. The Republican Party has this history of sticking its head in the sand, and with Hitler taking over the European continent, now is not the time to keep your heads in the sand. But I predict that Wendell Willkie is going to take Colorado and some other western states too, much to our embarrassment.
Ms. Griffiths, as you look at the election 1 month from today, how do you think Colorado will vote?
I'm afraid that Miss Sinclair might, oh, sorry, Miss Carney, sorry, my apologies, might be right, that we could go, there still are some people in Colorado who are very reactionary. They do not realize how big this world is and how we are all a part of it. I would be sad to see President Roosevelt go, not just for what he's done for all the people, but for his wife, who has done a remarkable, remarkable job bringing women to the forefront, bringing important issues to the forefront. She just visited Denver a few weeks ago. She has done incredibly. It almost makes you think that one day a woman could run for president.
There's been a lot of bold predictions in this program. I'm not exactly sure what to make of all of them, but Attorney General Rogers, I will throw it to you, especially with your ear to the ground when it comes to election issues. What do you think of what's going to happen 1 month from today?
Well, I think Ms. Carney is right that Colorado is going to go for Wilkie, and it's going to be a very close election nationwide. And here's what I would say to my Republican friends. Mr. Wilkie's a good man. He's done a good job of pulling his party, somewhat reluctantly, away from its isolationist roots and into realizing that we have to be engaged in the world because the world is going to engage with us no matter what we want. And he's an admirable man personally. His mother was a lawyer. But when you say in these perilous times, which are leading a president unprecedentedly to run for a third term, who can manage the presidency? We have the steadiness and executive leadership of President Roosevelt. And Mr. Wilkie, after he won the nomination, he comes to the Broadmoor for a 5-week working vacation. And ever since then, his campaign's been pulling boners, one thing after another. He's been a straddlebug too often, too much disorganization in times like this to be president. And the other thing I'd say to my Republican friends and my farmer friends, Henry Wallace is on the ticket. I served with him in the New Deal in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer for the Agriculture Administration. Henry Wallace is the greatest friend the farmer has ever had. He's going to be the vice president. I want to go to Washington and work with him to help all of Colorado's farmers.
Mr. Chase, what do you think of President Roosevelt's bid for an unprecedented third term?
Well, Mr. O'Fallon, I think the little lady here is exactly correct. I think that Wendell Wilkie does stand a very good chance of carrying the state of Colorado. I do think that FDR is a pretty good bet for a third term. However, despite the fact that FDR carried Colorado by an even greater margin 4 years ago than he did in 1932, something that hasn't yet been mentioned here is our very popular governor, Ralph Carr, a Republican. He's up for re-election to another 2-year term. Governor Carr is very well known as a highly principled man and a very good Republican. I think the drawing power of having Ralph Carr at the top of the ticket for the state offices is going to do wonders for Wendell Wilkie here in Colorado. I could see a slim chance for him to pull out the state of Colorado. However, the one thing that's working against him, the tide that's working against him, is this defense preparedness, because Mr. Wilkie is opposed to getting into the war. And I think the voters of Colorado are looking at all the economic benefits that are coming from the defense spending that's taking place here, and they're not too sure. They might be a little skeptical of that.
Well, it's a perfect time to thank our sponsor of tonight's program, Packard Motor Cars. If you're interested in getting one of these fine new models, the convertible, that's right. This one is 9 seconds from winter to summer. You can go down to Mountain Motors at Spear Boulevard in Sherman. Tell them if you're not interested in the convertible, you might be looking for the sedan with new refrigerated air, now available at Mountain Motors at Spear Boulevard and Sherman. Thank you for your sponsorship of tonight's program. Now it's time, as we do every week here on Colorado Inside Out, we look to the disgrace of the week. Ms. Griffiths, please start us off.
Well, I'm going to think about, really, of the decades. Denver is now 80 years old. We're beginning to lose a lot of our history, and I think that's a shame. We need to remember the past. Certainly, as we look at war, we need to remember what happened during the Great War. I would be very sad to find out, for example, that the building named after me, where so many people, 1.5 million, have been educated, the Emily Griffith Opportunity School, to discover that one day it would disappear.
Let's hope that never happens. Attorney General Rogers.
Well, I looked at the bestseller list and I went down to the Denver Public Library. I borrowed this book, The Wave of the Future by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. She's the wife of Charles Lindbergh, the great aviator and the head of the America First Committee. And it's awful that this is a bestseller. She's an admirer of fascism. She says if we have She thinks fascism will come to America, that it's the wave of the future, and she says it won't be all vulgar like the German and Italian versions, but it'll be crisp and tart like an American apple. Tyranny's not the wave of our future, and President Roosevelt has said that the tide of freedom and democracy is going to strengthen and not go out.
Mr. Chase, your disgrace of the week, please.
My disgrace of the week is Denver Tramway. Denver Tramway brought those abominable electrical buses down to 16th Street this week, and I think eventually, now they're calling them the trolley buses, eventually I think they're going to replace the trolleys. Can you see our pedestrians downtown trying to dodge and weave in and out as these buses don't stay to the tracks? They'll go all over.
Another preposterous prediction around here. And Miss Carney, what is your disgrace of the week?
Well, it sounds like New York. Well, this is not my prediction. This is my disgrace. My disgrace is the Denver Housing Authority and their bigoted, segregated Lincoln Park housing project. It's just a shame in these days, in 1940, in the 20th century.
Let's get to say something nice about somebody, a segment we always do. Miss Griffiths.
Well, and for some history that's been remembered this year, Mount Olivet has just put up a memorial to Baby Doe and Horace Tabor, two pioneers in this state.
Attorney General Chase.
Another book on the
Rogers,
best. No problem, sir. Another book on the bestseller list, written by a young Harvard graduate named John F. Kennedy. He's the son of Joe Kennedy, our ambassador to England. Why England Slept looks at why the English put their heads in the sand and failed to recognize the growing menace of Hitler just a few years ago. This young man shows us the way and shows why America cannot afford to sleep. We must wake up and be vigilant to the Nazi menace.
And Mr. Chase.
Tell you what, the Colorado Highway Department, kudos to them. They just finished America's highest paved auto road, clear up to the top of Mount Evans. But not only that, they just finished hard paving the state's first highway, down from Denver down to Littleton on US 85. And they're straightening out that god-awful mess up at the Riverside Cemetery by rerouting US 85 north of the city. Great for them. Colorado Highway Department.
And Miss Carney.
Well, my kudos go to First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt and to the NAACP for pressuring President Roosevelt to create that program for Negro pilots. That is a new day. That is a new day. I hope the Denver Housing Authority will pay attention. It's a new day. We're all Americans here.
That is all the time we have for tonight's episode of Colorado Inside Out. I want to thank all of our panelists for their insight as we look back on the events of this week in 1940. Be sure to catch me at KFELAM, the cry of the Old West, for all of the important news for our city, our nation, and our world. For everyone here at the KBDI studios,